Hello. 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 I'm reviewing Peacemaker today. I know the show ended like 3 weeks ago, but I still have thoughts on it, so I'm going to share them. Uh the so I mentioned in the Fear podcast that Kirk and I had watched Peacemaker, the most recent Fear podcast, which is not getting very many views, even by my low standards. So there's a card. Is it over here? Is it over here? I don't know. Sometimes I don't remember. I don't know which side it's on. It's one of these corners up here. I'll put a card. I'll put a card. But you should go watch that too. But I'm gonna talk more detail about Peacemaker now because it I had like zero expectation. I Peacemaker. Well, let me just share what it is because I guarantee a lot of people don't even know. It's the spin-off HBO Max show about one of the characters from James Gunn's Suicide Squad. Not the old Suicide Squad from 2016 that sucked. Well, yeah, we'll just say it. Hindsight, it sucked. I don't think I was too harsh on it when I first saw it, but upon retrospect, it was not good. But no, I'm talking about the one that came out last year, The Suicide Squad, directed and written by James Gunn, the guy behind the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Uh, it's a spin-off show about John Cena's character from that movie, Peacemaker. There was a lot of there were a lot of reasons, and I did not see the Suicide Squad when it came out. I would have reviewed it if I did. I watched the movie for the first time before watching Peacemaker, and the only reason I even watched Peacemaker is I was being told by a lot of friends that it was a very good, very fun show, and it also has a very funny opening. There's a whole opening dance number that they do. Do you really want to taste it? Where all the characters are like deadpan, stone faced dancing. It's that it was very funny and it was going viral, as they say. Uh, and I was just being told by a lot of people that Peacemaker was really good. Uh, and so it was like, all right, I guess I'll watch the John Cena starring spin-off show to a movie I haven't seen. Uh, and I'd also heard the movie was good. I was interested in watching the movie, but this show is just like, without having seen the movie, I'm like, why would I care? Why should I care? And that's the question I plan to answer for you in this review today. Why should I care about some like D-list obscure DC Comics character that was in the Suicide Squad? Why should I care about that character enough to watch an entire show revolving around him? And then I watched the Suicide Squad and I kind of understood. Uh, because in that movie, Peacemaker does something very he spoilers for the Suicide Squad. He kills, vague spoilers. He kills, no, actually I'm not gonna who cares about this? Spoilers for a movie that came out almost a year ago at this point. Peacemaker kills Rick Flag, and when he does so, he has this look on his face. Like, I'm not gonna go into detail the whole arc, but it's like he has a look when he's in that scene that it's like, oh, there's more depth to this like turncoat betrayal villain like character than it seems in this movie. And James Gunn also saw that too, apparently, in John Cena's acting, because during the pandemic he wrote the show, and then Warner Brothers, desperate for HBO Max content, was like, sure, we'll give you the budget to make your Peacemaker show. And that's what makes Peacemaker so interesting. It's kind of the anti streaming service spin-off show, because this is becoming a thing now that Disney started with Marvel and Star Wars, where people are just like, the era of movie spin-off TV shows is coming back, but through streaming. Like everybody wants their movies to bolster their streaming platforms by doing a spin-off. Dune is getting a spin-off show. Is Avatar getting? I can't even keep track of what's getting like spin-off shows. And when I heard that Peacemaker was being made, I think I and everyone's reaction was basically just like, "Oh, great! So HBO Max, Warner Brothers is trying to do the MCU shows. So, but like badly because it's Warner Brothers. Uh, but like what helps is that that's not what this was. James Gunn wrote the script for Peacemaker on a whim, and then Warner Brothers, admittedly desperate to do exactly what Disney was doing, was. But the difference is when the Disney shows are like, okay, here's how we're gonna further this cinematic universe narrative. Here's what these spin-off shows are going to achieve, and then we hire people on them. This one is different. This is the opposite. It's a creator's passion project that Warner Brothers was like, sure, we need content. We'll take any content. It's the secret boon of streaming services being desperate for content. The downside is that you get like garbage, but then the plus side is when you get something that likely would not have been made otherwise that has no like studio oversight, because Peacemaker has like no studio oversight. They're allowed to make jokes about like, this is a very raunchy R-rated comedy. They make jokes about Aquaman like fucking fish and Superman having a poop fetish, and they reference like obscure joke comic book characters like Batmite and like all of this stuff. If you tried to do it in a Marvel property, they'd be like, we don't want to canonize Batmite yet. Kevin Feige would show up and be like, we're not canonizing Howard the Duck, or whatever the weird like references. Howard the Duck's a bad example because he's in Guardians. But like, it's truly James Gunn unhinged, even more than the Suicide Squad is. A lot of the conversations between characters in Peacemaker feel like goofy improv, like D&D session, like friends shooting the shit, like nonsense writing, which makes it nonsense writing is not being used as in a negative here. The show is still very much like thematically and conceptually put together well, and it actually has some like surprise, like it has some surprising dramatic chops. It's not just goofy superhero like poop Superman poop fetish show. It's just it has a nice like irreverence that I don't see from most superhero things. Are either full on parodies, are most superhero things are either full on deconstruction parodies of the concept, The Boys, Invincible, those kinds of things, or they're superhero stories that you're meant to like take seriously and believe, and like not believe, but just like there are superhero stories where the suspension of disbelief ceiling is kind of low, and this is meant to take place in a universe, and you're meant to take it seriously. Snyder Cut, Marvel movies, like even when they're fun, they don't like poke fun at themselves. The Suicide Squad pokes fun at itself, and Peacemaker really pokes fun at itself. Peacemaker is a lame superhero. He lives in a trailer in a rural area in the middle of nowhere, and like nobody really respects him or views him as a hero or even like a supervillain. Like people just don't care about him. He's just some weird dude in a weird dorky costume. And so is his friend Vigilante, and so are like most of the super character. Even when like other super elements start to show up, they're all like James Gunn. James Gunn's writing in Peacemaker shows an awareness of kind of the inherent, for lack of a better term, lameness of like niche genre stuff, like superhero stuff. Like it's aware of the fact that if superheroes existed in real life, there would be a lot of D tier ones running around in like bad costumes, just kind of embarrassing themselves, just like embarrassments to society. And that's where Peacemaker starts, and that's kind of what, like, he and because of that, weirdly enough, like despite how goofy the show is and how like lame the characters can be, that's what makes the storytelling grounded and real. Is that rather than Peacemaker and Vigilante and all these characters being larger than life action movie figures, they're like real people with real issues, and their real issues actually get addressed in a serious way that's not just like, oh ho ho, this character has superhero trauma because their country got blown up by the evil dictator. Instead, it's Peacemaker's father is a horrible racist who uh, encouraged Peacemaker to do a bunch of awful things and accidentally led to Peacemaker feeling guilt for killing his brother when really it was the dad's lack of oversight that caused it to happen. Like that kind of thing. There's a whole conflict with Peacemaker's like full-on Nazi father who even has his own like supervillain suit, the White Dragon, where he has to like get and that drama is like moving. It's serious. It's played seriously and not like for laughs. And John Cena's acting. I feel like John Cena's acting gets better in every project I see him in, but this character is the first time where I've seen him and been like, okay, this is a great performance. He's playing a great character in the show, and all the other characters are great as well. I mentioned Vigilante earlier. It's Peacemaker's best friend superhero who's like, he exists to make Peacemaker look kind of cool. Like Vigilante is just like this lame, awkward Peacemaker wannabe. But what's interesting about him is he's also like, probably a sociopath, possibly on the spectrum. He doesn't like. Peacemaker is somebody who bottles up his emotions and like acts like nothing affects him and acts like he's a merciless warrior, and then those walls get broken down throughout the show. Whereas Vigilante does not seem to have those emotions and knows he doesn't have those emotions. But instead of just presenting a character like that, a sociopathic vigilante killer, as like scary or instead of presenting that as either justified or the other side of the coin, scary and like bad guy, he's it's I've never seen this take on a sociopathic character before, where it's like a sociopath who fundamentally wants to do good, and is learning how to do good and recognize what good is when his sense of empathy is like not there, or not entirely not there, but just deeply different than what it should be. And that's a really interesting take on like a lot of the like Peacemaker and Vigilante are not mentally well. There's a lot of mentally ill elements, and like that stuff is not played for the stuff that shouldn't be played for laughs is never played for laughs in Peacemaker, and everything else is up for grabs. It's very tasteful, and it's a very good show. And there's a lot like outside of Peacemaker and Vigilante, there's a black gay character in the show named Adebayo, who's revealed to be Amanda Waller's daughter, that she kind of like plugged into this mission to do some stuff, and she's the heart of the show, because like Peacemaker and Vigilante can doof around and be like problematic, but then they have other characters there to call them out on their shit. You can tell it's very purposeful, because if you know anything about James Gunn and you know about his getting canceled and then getting uncanceled history, you know that like he there was an effort made to be socially conscious and not just make a show about problematic like action hero characters becoming unproblematic because the story says they're unproblematic. Peacemaker and Vigilante don't end the story in like they don't end the story as proper superheroes, as perfect people. They end the story having succeeded their mission and like formed a bond with their team, but they still have a lot of self work to do. And most of the characters have a lot of like self work to do. So it makes it's a really good anti-hero story. It's also funny as hell. I haven't even been talking about the comedy, but it's funny as hell. There's so many ad libs and like it's not like Marvel quips where they pause the movie to quip. Friends. It's more like friends hanging out and like riffing off each other. There's some very good. Apparently, a lot of it, especially on John Cena's end, is improv. He's a very talented improviser. Uh, and that it's so funny. They go off on these like tangents sometimes, and they're always so funny. It reminds me of me and my friends playing D&D. It's just like here's the story, and we take the story seriously, but also here's like wacky comedic hijinks and like stupid like bit humor that it's very much up my alley comedy wise. And I also think the balance of like storytelling, it's hard to do this comedic of a take on superheroes, but also still have a narrative that doesn't just amount to like parody. But James Gunn found the balance. He's kind of a master of finding that balance, I think. Like comic book movies are seem to be James Gunn's like specialty now. And he's really good at it. I feel like he understands what people like about comic book stuff, but also understands what people don't like and what like breaks people's he understands what the ceiling is for how seriously you can take these kinds of stories, like what the correct balance is for that. And I would recommend Peacemaker. I think it's probably better than any of the Marvel shows, just because it's like the sheer creative freedom of it is really awesome, and just it's a really fun show. If you've seen the Suicide Squad, you should go watch Peacemaker, and if you haven't seen the Suicide Squad, you should probably watch it before you watch Peacemaker. The movie's also on HBO Max, so you can literally just watch it and then go straight into the show. It's a great time. Do you really want to test it?